Right now, like legally speaking, a doctor can take a weekend seminar in some hotel conference room, buy a scalpel on Monday, and literally start reshaping human bodies.
Yeah, it is a terrifying reality.
It's insane. No specialized surgical residency,
Yeah.
no, decade of anatomical training, just this brief 3-day crash course.
And suddenly they're advertising themselves as a cosmetic surgeon.
Exactly. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're exploring the fascinating and honestly, pretty shocking world of plastic surgery.
Totally. Because you have practitioners from entirely unrelated fields, right? Like
Hmm?
internal medicine or ER
Yeah,
doctors,
yeah.
sometimes even non-surgical specialists. And they take what is basically an introductory class and then jump into these incredibly complex, high-stakes procedures.
Which is exactly why we're doing this. We're taking our source material today directly from the insights of a highly experienced, board-certified plastic surgeon. We really want to pull back the curtain on the industry for you.
Yeah, the goal is to decode the anatomy of a truly elite surgeon, to separate the absolute masters from the dangerously unqualified.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with that weekend course illusion. Because when you compare a 3-day hotel seminar to the actual baseline requirement of a board-certified plastic surgeon,
Yeah.
the contrast is just, it's staggering.
Oh, it really is. We are talking about roughly 15 years of intensive training after high school.
Wait, 15 years?
Yeah, 15. The timeline is grueling. So you have your 4 years of university, 4 years of medical school, and honestly, that only gets you to the starting line.
Just the starting line.
Wow, right. Then a dedicated plastic surgery residency takes another 5 to 8 years. And that's continuous, high-pressure, hands-on training.
And aren't there fellowships after that, too?
Exactly. Many elite surgeons will then go on to do an additional 1 or 2 year fellowship just to master a highly specific microdiscipline. It's a decade and a half of just, well, exhausting anatomical study.
And that timeline is necessary because of the sheer complexity of the human body. Like, let's look at something like a Brazilian butt lift, a BBL, which is, incredibly popular right now.
Oh, absolutely. And the sources highlight that this is actually one of the most dangerous procedures out there if it's performed by someone without that 15-year foundation.
Right, because it's not just moving fat from one place to another like people think.
No, not at all. You are dealing with complex vascular anatomy.
Yeah, the sources mention that if a doctor without that deep spatial awareness accidentally injects fat deep into the muscle instead of the subcutaneous space, that fat can enter the gluteal vein,
And then it travels directly to the heart and lungs,
causing a fatal pulmonary embolism.
which is just tragic. And this raises an important question, right? How could a 3-day course possibly equip someone to navigate that invisible, high-stakes environment?
It can't. It just can't.
No, because the 15-year pathway isn't just about passing written exams on textbook anatomy. It's about the slow, deliberate development of 3D spatial awareness.
Like muscle memory.
Exactly. Through thousands of hours of dissecting and operating, a master surgeon learns to feel the subtle differences in tissue resistance. Like they know where a major nerve or blood vessel is located just by the texture of the surrounding fascia.
Wow. Just by touch.
Yeah. You cannot learn the tactile feedback of living, breathing human tissue from a PowerPoint presentation on a Saturday afternoon.
It is literally like someone taking a 2-day seminar on the theory of aerodynamics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then being legally cleared to fly a commercial jet full of passengers through a thunderstorm.
That's a great way to put it.
They might know what the buttons on the dashboard do, but they have zero instinct for how the machine responds to unpredictable turbulence.
Yeah.
You need the pilot who has thousands of flight hours in every possible weather condition.
And that unpredictable turbulence is exactly what happens in an operating room. Because human anatomy varies wildly from person to person.
Like, things aren't always where the textbook says they are.
Exactly. An artery might run slightly left of where it should be, or, maybe scar tissue from a previous injury has totally altered the underlying structure.
So the surgeon has to figure it out on the fly.
Right. The foundational skill of an elite surgeon is that ability to piece together those three-dimensional anatomical puzzles in real time and safely navigate completely unexpected complications.
Which makes sense. But that deep anatomical problem solving, it wasn't developed in some luxury clinic in Beverly Hills either.
Or not at all.
Yeah, to understand the sheer mechanical skill required to safely alter the human body, you actually have to look at where the entire field of plastic surgery began. It was forged out of absolute grim necessity in the trenches of World War I.
Yeah, the history here is wild. The sheer scale of artillery and trench warfare in World War I resulted in injuries that the medical field had quite literally never seen before.
Right, because of basic triage advances, soldiers were actually surviving these horrific facial and bodily mutilations.
But they were left completely unable to function. I mean, they couldn't eat, they couldn't speak, and they were entirely ostracized from society.
Just heartbreaking.
It was. So the field of plastic surgery was essentially invented by surgeons desperately trying to reconstruct these shattered faces and bodies.
And they had to invent entirely new mechanisms for moving living tissue, right?
Exactly. Moving tissue from one part of the body to another while keeping the blood supply perfectly intact.
Like taking a flap of skin and muscle from the chest.
Leaving the blood vessels connected.
Right, and then rotating it up to rebuild a jawline or a nose. They were literally putting people back together from scratch, restoring basic human dignity.
It's incredible what they managed to do.
It really is. But I have to admit, I'm a little stuck on this transition.
How so?
Well, if the roots of the field are so noble, restoring basic human function for war veterans, modern cosmetic surgery like doing a facelift or a tummy tuck for purely aesthetic reasons, it feels like a massive departure from that noble origin.
I can see why you'd say that.
Yeah, it almost feels disconnected from the medical necessity that birthed it.
It is a very natural reaction to view them as disconnected, but the underlying reality is that cosmetic surgery is really just the ultimate refinement of reconstructive surgery.
The ultimate refinement, how do you mean?
Think about the physical mechanics involved. The exact same hands, eyes, and tissue management techniques required to rebuild a jawline shattered by shrapnel are the tools used to tighten the underlying musculature during a facelift.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. To successfully perform a cosmetic procedure, you must have an absolute mastery of the underlying structural foundation. During those grueling 15 years of training, residents spend the vast majority of their time intensely focused on complex reconstructive cases.
Like rebuilding breasts after cancer mastectomies.
Exactly. Or repairing congenital cleft palates. You can't safely enhance a structure if you don't fully understand how to rebuild it from the ground up.
So the cosmetic surgeon who only wants to do purely aesthetic enhancements, they still have to master the trauma reconstruction first.
Yes. Because that is where you learn how the body heals, how blood supply functions, and how tissue reacts to extreme tension. Exactly the same mechanisms are at play.
That makes a lot of sense.
But moving from reconstructive trauma to elective cosmetic enhancement introduces a daunting new variable.
Which is?
The visual outcome. In traditional general surgery, an operation can be a flawless masterpiece of technique, right? A surgeon might navigate complex blood vessels and remove a diseased gallbladder with absolute perfection.
Right, but nobody sees it.
Exactly. Once the patient is sewn up, that beautiful internal work is hidden forever. The primary audience for that work is the pathology report. The patient simply goes home and feels better.
But in plastic surgery, everything is on the outside.
Everything.
Every single choice the surgeon makes, every millimeter of tissue they remove or reposition, it's going to be scrutinized immediately by the patient looking in a mirror.
Oh, absolutely.
It will be judged by their family, their friends, and society at large. The result isn't a lab test. The result is a highly visible, permanent alteration of someone's identity.
And that introduces a profound level of subjectivity. Because two surgeons can have the exact same 15 years of rigorous reconstructive training, they can both possess flawless technical skill,
Right.
and they can perform the exact same procedure, let's say a rhinoplasty or a breast augmentation. But the visual outcome can look wildly different depending on the aesthetic choices each surgeon makes in the operating room.
Because beauty is completely subjective. There is no mathematical formula for the perfect nose or the perfect jawline.
None at all.
You are essentially commissioning an artist to work in the medium of your own body. If you want a subtle natural refinement, but you hire a surgeon whose internal definition of beauty is highly dramatic, exaggerated, and, artificial.
You are going to be devastated by the result.
Yeah. It is like hiring a brilliant, highly acclaimed abstract painter to do a photorealistic family portrait. Both artists are highly skilled. They both understand color and composition on a master level, but their grand vision of art simply does not match what you want.
That's a perfect analogy. And what's fascinating here is how you practically navigate that subjectivity as a patient. Because you cannot measure artistic aptitude on a medical chart.
So how do you check it?
The sources emphasize that the single most important action you can take is to rigorously and aggressively examine the surgeon's before and after portfolio.
Not just to see if the scars healed nicely.
Right. You aren't just looking to verify that the surgical incisions healed cleanly. You are looking to see if their specific internal concept of beauty aligns with yours.
So you look for someone who looked like you before the surgery.
Yes. You look for patients who had a similar starting anatomy to yours and assess whether you actually like the artistic choices the surgeon made for them.
You really have to ensure your definitions of beauty are perfectly aligned before you ever let them pick up a scalpel. But having a grand artistic vision in your head is one thing, right? Executing that vision on living, bleeding tissue takes us down to the microscopic level. I mean, artistry is the grand vision, but execution comes down to an obsessive focus on the thousands of tiny variables that dictate how the body actually heals.
It really does. And a phenomenal example from the sources centers on something every surgical patient worries about, which is the stars.
Oh, definitely. Scars are a huge concern.
Right. And in many types of general surgery, the primary goal at the end of the operation is simply to close the wound safely and quickly, just to minimize the time the patient spends under anesthesia.
So they use staples.
Often, yes. A surgeon can use a surgical stapler to close a long incision in a matter of seconds. It is highly efficient and perfectly acceptable for a purely functional outcome.
But a stapler pulls the outermost layer of skin tightly together, right? And as the body heals, the natural tension of the skin pulls back against those staples.
Exactly. And it often leaves a very noticeable, widened track mark type of scar.
Yikes. So what do elite plastic surgeons do differently?
They completely bypass the stapler. They refuse to take that 10-second shortcut. Instead, they utilize a meticulous technique involving multiple layers of deep sutures.
Deep sutures?
Yeah. They are actually stitching the foundational layers of tissue together deep beneath the surface of the skin.
Oh, I see.
The biological mechanism behind why they do this is crucial. Think of the skin as a delicate fabric. If you pull it tight, it stretches, and the healing collagen fibers widen, creating a thick scar.
Right.
But by creating those deep internal structural supports using dissolving sutures in the fascia and the deeper dermal layers, the surgeon is absorbing all of the physical tension internally.
Oh, so it's like building a suspension bridge.
Oh.
The deep sutures are the heavy steel cables anchored underground. They're doing all the heavy lifting and absorbing all the structural tension, so the road surface, the outermost layer of skin in this case, can just lie perfectly flat, totally undisturbed.
That is exactly it. When the outer skin has zero tension pulling on it, it heals smoothly, resulting in a fine line scar that becomes almost invisible over time.
That's amazing. But I imagine it takes a lot longer.
Oh, vastly more time. More time, patience, and technical skill to close a wound in 4 separate layers. But it is the difference between a functional result and an elite aesthetic result.
And that obsession with how living tissue heals under tension is exactly why elite surgeons can't just, copy and paste a surgical technique from the left side of the body to the right side.
Definitely not. We all walk around operating under the assumption that our faces and bodies are perfectly symmetrical.
Right, but we aren't.
No, we are organically imperfect. The left side of your face has a slightly different bone structure than the right. One eye socket might be slightly deeper. The musculature on one side of your jaw might be more developed just from years of chewing predominantly on that side.
Wow.
And the same natural asymmetry applies to breasts, to hips, to the entire skeletal frame.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. A top-tier surgeon has to anticipate and account for all of that invisible asymmetry before they make the first cut.
They absolutely do.
If a surgeon just measures out the exact same amount of tissue to remove from the left side and the right side, the final result will look bizarrely lopsided. They are operating in a microscopic world where literal millimeters dictate whether a face looks harmoniously balanced or distorted and unnatural.
Right. They have to constantly adjust their technique on the fly, compensating for your natural differences to create the optical illusion of perfect symmetry.
So if the bone is different on one side,
Exactly. If the underlying cheekbone is slightly flatter on the right side, the surgeon has to anticipate how the soft tissue will drape over that specific bone structure once gravity takes hold and adjust the tension of the facelift accordingly.
that sounds incredibly difficult.
It requires synthesizing the 15 years of anatomical training, the reconstructive problem-solving skills, and the subjective artistic eye, all focused on a difference of 2 millimeters.
So we have this massive theoretical framework now. We understand the necessity of the 15-year crucible, the reconstructive origins, the alignment of subjective artistry, and this microscopic obsession with tension and asymmetry. Right.
But if you are listening to this and you are actually considering a procedure, how do you translate all of this into confidently choosing a surgeon? Like, how do you protect yourself from the weekend course doctors and their aggressive marketing campaigns?
Well, the sources provide a very clear, practical vetting checklist.
Okay, let's hear it.
First, as we covered, you rigorously verify their online portfolio to ensure your artistic tastes align.
Yeah.
Second, you utilize your network. Personal recommendations from friends or family who have experienced a surgeon's bedside manner and long-term results, those are invaluable.
Yeah, you want to talk to real people.
Third, you verify their board certification in plastic surgery specifically, not some vague, legally undefined term like cosmetic medicine.
That's a huge distinction.
It is. And finally, you check their track record in the community. You want a surgeon who has a long-established history operating out of reputable accredited clinics or major hospitals. And that leads to a very specific benchmark the sources mention. They strongly recommend finding a surgeon who has been in active independent practice for at least 10 years.
They do.
Now, I want to push back on that 10-year rule just a bit.
Okay, go ahead.
We live in a medical landscape where surgical technology, lasers, and robotic-assisted devices are evolving incredibly fast, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't a younger surgeon, someone fresh out of that 15-year educational gauntlet, actually be more up-to-date on the absolute latest cutting-edge surgical technology? Why penalize them for not having a decade of independent practice?
It is a very valid argument, and younger surgeons certainly bring fresh perspectives and deeply updated theoretical knowledge to the table. But the reality of surgery is that it's not primarily about mastering the latest machine.
It's not.
No, it is about mastering human biology. And human tissue is infinitely unpredictable. A textbook can tell you how a typical patient might heal, but it cannot tell you how this specific patient's tissue will react to trauma.
Oh, I see.
It cannot predict how their unique scar tissue will form, or how the specific density of their skin will stretch over time.
Right. So a young surgeon might execute a perfectly flawless facelift in the operating room, and it looks amazing on day 3. But what does that facelift look like 5 years later, when gravity and the natural aging process have interacted with the surgical alterations?
Precisely. You cannot learn those unpredictable long-term variables from a new medical device. It takes a solid decade of pure repetition, a high volume of diverse cases, and crucially, seeing your own patients return year after year.
You have to see your own results age.
Yes. A master surgeon learns from observing how their own work holds up over a decade. Experience teaches you the thousands of microscopic, intuitive adjustments you need to make for each unique patient, just to ensure the result looks as harmonious 10 years down the line as it did on day 1.
The repetitions matter. Seeing the long-term consequences of your own artistic and mechanical choices is the only way to achieve true mastery. But even with all of those repetitions, even with the 15 years of training and the perfect artistic portfolio, there is one final, incredibly critical element that has to happen before anyone ever enters an operating room.
Yeah. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, all the technical skill, anatomical knowledge, and experience in the world is utterly useless if the surgeon fails at one fundamental task.
Which is?
They have to actually listen to you. The consultation room is where the entire foundation of a successful surgery is either built or destroyed.
The sources emphasize that some surgeons, even incredibly talented and experienced ones, fall into the dangerous trap of projecting their own aesthetic desires onto the patient.
Happens all the time.
A patient might come in and say, "I'm unhappy with my profile. They think my nose is too big." A surgeon who isn't listening might immediately start sketching out an aggressive rhinoplasty.
Right, but a surgeon who truly listens, who asks the right questions, might realize that the patient's nose is actually perfectly proportionate, but their chin is recessed, throwing the whole facial balance off.
So a great surgeon acts as a translator.
Yes. They have to listen to a patient's vague emotional insecurities and translate them into a highly specific, mathematical, physical surgical plan. They have to understand your unique goals, your daily lifestyle, and your specific anatomical limitations.
And crucially, a master surgeon must possess the integrity to tell a patient no.
That's the hardest part.
If a patient requests a procedure that will compromise their underlying anatomy or requests an aesthetic change that the surgeon believes will look distorted or disproportionate, the surgeon has to be willing to turn away the business.
Exactly.
If they aren't deeply listening to you and assessing your psychological readiness in the consultation room, they are certainly not going to be thinking about your best long-term interests when you are unconscious in the operating room.
Yeah.
A surgeon trying to sell you on procedures you didn't ask for is the ultimate red flag.
100%.
So what does this all mean? We've covered a massive amount of incredibly complex ground today.
We really have.
If you are taking anything away from this deep dive into the hidden anatomy of the plastic surgery industry, let it be this. Never, ever settle for the illusion of the weekend course. You are looking for a board-certified professional who has survived the 15-year crucible of intense medical training.
Yes.
You want someone whose delicate cosmetic skills are firmly grounded in the complex, high-stakes problem-solving of trauma and reconstructive surgery. You must find a surgeon whose subjective artistic eye genuinely matches your own internal definition of beauty.
That portfolio check is key.
Right. You want an obsessive professional who utilizes deep sutures like a suspension bridge to ensure invisible scars, and who has the 10 years of independent experience to know exactly how your unique biology will react over time. But above all else, you need a doctor who sits down, looks you in the eye, and actually listens to what you want.
Because it is a profound, life-altering responsibility they're taking on when they alter your physical identity.
It really is.
And considering all of this, the meticulous reconstructive training, the precise microscopic execution, and the deeply subjective nature of what we actually consider beautiful, it leaves us with a rather profound paradox to consider.
Oh, what's that?
Well, we know that the societal definition of beauty is entirely subjective, right? And we know that it constantly shifts across different cultures and different eras. What was considered the perfect body type in the 1990s is drastically different from the aesthetic ideals of today.
That is very true.
So how will the highly specific artistic choices and permanent bodily changes that plastic surgeons are making today be viewed 50 or 100 years from now?
Oh, wow.
When we undergo these highly advanced, deeply permanent surgical procedures, are we actually sculpting ourselves to a timeless human ideal? Or are we permanently altering our anatomy just to chase a temporary fleeting trend of the current decade?
That is quite the lingering thought to leave on. The absolute permanence of surgical mastery mixed with the relentless impermanence of beauty trends. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you feel significantly more armed, deeply informed, and ready to look way past the glamorous surface level the next time you see a cosmetic transformation. We will catch you next time.